Welcome back, troops. Let's Tab 59. I hope everybody's well. If you're new to the channel, or you've watched me before and you haven't subscribed, please consider it. I'm not saying do it, I'm saying consider it. So, as the title suggests then, spying. Cold War spying. Now, as soon as you mention that, you can be forgiven to immediately start thinking about MI6, KGB, CIA, etc. James Bond characters, whisking away in Aston Martins, stealing stuff off the Russians or the Soviet Union. You can be forgiven for that. But that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about sort of something along those lines of spying, and it was spying, it's more like reconnaissance really, but what really happened in the Cold War with the missions that were out there. Now, any of you Cold War veterans, certainly if you served out in Germany, you'll remember Socksmith. And I'll get into what that is for people that don't know. So, as you know, at the end of the Second World War, Germany had been conquered by the four main powers, the four main allied powers, the Soviet Union, United States, France and Great Britain, United Kingdom. And so it decided the best way to manage the defeated German empire was to split the country, Germany, up into four chunks, if you like. So the Soviet Union, obviously because they come from the east across into Germany, they took the eastern side of Germany. And the Americans, the British and the French took a chunk each of the western side of Germany. And the same with Berlin. Now Berlin, the city of Berlin then fell within East Germany. And so the whole of Berlin was in East Germany, in the Soviet controlled zone. So that had to get split up as well. So again, naturally, the Soviet Union got the East Berlin, and the French, the United States and the UK got a chunk each of West Berlin. So relationships between the West and the Soviet Union broke down pretty quick, and a lot of distrust between the East and the West started to creep in. So in 1946, just a year after the war, a treaty, an agreement was come to that there should be, each of the four powers should have a military liaison mission, an MLM. And it's a group of soldiers, a team of soldiers that could operate and move around fairly freely in each other's sector. But there was a few caveats. Had to be in a civilian style car. The car had to be clearly marked with a number plate. For instance, the Soviet Union number plate was a yellow background with the Russian flag, the Soviet Union flag on it, and a 2-digit serial number normally. And likewise with the British and the American and the French. 3-man teams in the British cars anyway, so you had an officer that oversaw the team leader, there'd be a senior NCO and a driver. And they could live, the British team lived in Potsdam, mainly. The Soviet team, Socksmith team, they lived in married quarters. They put them up in an officer's married quarter. And interestingly, the Soviet team was allowed to enter the family's naffy and buy goods. The team had to be unarmed and had to be in uniform. So the four teams were set up, it was all agreed, and the main reason for it was to build a bit of trust. In other words, if we had a team over their side, they had a team our side, each team could see that there wasn't a building threat up to World War III. They could see that we weren't, massing troops on their border or getting ready to. It was just an exercise we were doing, not the start of an invasion or whatever. So it was just to build a bit of trust and give each other a little bit of reassurance that we weren't about to turn the Cold War hot. Now, as I've said many times, I'm no historian. Just only a little outtake on the bits and pieces I know. I had 7 years continuous service in West Germany back in the Cold War, from the 70s through to mid-80s. So I knew a little bit, as many of you veterans out there from the Cold War stationed in Germany will remember as well. So the teams were set up in 46 and off they went. And it was a great opportunity, obviously, to go, haha, I'll tell you what we can do. While you're out there having a look around East Germany, if you see your latest bit of kit, photograph it, count the numbers, find out what you can. So it's a bit like a subtle reconnaissance, if you like. Not completely covert and not completely overt, but they were reconnaissance on each other. The Russians were doing the same, Americans were doing, we're all doing the same. We're all looking at the Soviet kit, they're looking at our kit. Anything new, unusual, hadn't seen before, a vehicle that we didn't recognise, get a photograph of it, or maybe some video footage, and get that information back when you come back off your tour, off that mission, so that it could be analysed by the intelligence services. And if it's something new that we hadn't seen before, you know, it would give us an edge on what they were up to and what they were developing. And they were doing the same. So it was a bit of a game, really, wasn't it? A little spying game that was going on with this military liaison missions. Now, in the early 60s then, I think around 61 was it, the fences that were dividing this sector, the east and the west, the Russians, the Soviet Union, decided to build a wall. And that's what they did. Obviously, as you know, they built the wall, the Berlin Wall, sealed it off. And the Cold War, a lot of distrust started happening. Just after the wall went up, obviously we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. Tensions were heightening between East and West. And we came very close on a few occasions, I believe, to the Cold War going hot, World War III. So we needed more and more intelligence of what the Russians, the Soviet Union, were up to and what kit they were developing. And so what would happen, these, certainly the Bricksmith team, and we had a 31 man strong team in total. And as I say, they went out in a car, 3 men in a car. That was the actual teams that went in and started to scout about. So what they would do is, Bricksmith guys would drive into the east, tour around. They would know where the East German training areas were, where the ranges were, airfields, all sorts of military installations. And they would visit those. Now, when they got near to the sensitive areas, there would be clear signage in 4 languages, Russian, in German, in French, and in English, prohibiting socksmiths or anyone else going into that area. And obviously, if you broke that rule and you went in that area and got caught, then the punishment was to be, you'd probably be captured as a proper spy, if you like. It wouldn't end well for you. So the lads would go over there, drive around in their car, they'd see an exercise happening, and they would start to count the tanks, the types of tanks, what the troops were doing. I mean, interestingly, gathering intelligence, when, say, the Soviet forces were training on a big area, and they pulled out of that area, straight away, the Bricksmith lads would go in there and start to forage around and see if the Soviet forces had left anything behind. I mean, it happens. You remember being in the army, lads, you come off exercise, someone's lost something. All right, it might be a bungee, but you might lose a certain bit of kit. And that was what was important, trying to find these bits of kit. Maybe spent ammunition off of a range, anything like that. They would gather this kit up and bring it back over to the West, and it would get analysed. There was one time when the Soviets, I think on the T-80, started to produce this reactive armour, little metal bricks, if you like. You see it a lot now on tanks, and they strap these or bolt these little metal bricks all around the turret of the tank, etc., in vulnerable places. And the idea was that if an anti-tank rocket of some description was to hit that, rather than penetrating straight into the tank, it would explode outwards and it was nearly double the protective armour of that vehicle, reactive armour. And the British really needed to get hold of that. They needed to see what it was and how they could then defeat that. And the Bricksmith team is documented quite clearly. You can find a video footage of it. They went in and they were planning to steal one off of a tank at a railhead. But anyway, they actually found one on the training area, so it must have fallen off the tank or whatever, and they managed to throw it in the car and get it back to our side and analyse it and then work out how they could defeat it. So that's the sort of jobs they were doing. And funny enough, that when that particular incident, when they brought back this piece of reactive armour, the Soviets never knew that we had it, because the lads, the Soviet lads, the tank crew, the East German tank crew, whatever, that lost it on the training area, didn't report its loss, and it wasn't discovered. Because they knew if they reported, I've lost a piece of top secret reactive armour on the training area, they're off to the salt mine, mate. They're down the gulag for the rest of their service, or longer. So they never reported it, so no one ever knew. So that's the type of thing that went on. Another incident, the United States mission, military liaison mission out there, they were observing a Soviet airfield being built. The Soviets had built this runway, but it was empty. They hadn't put it wasn't operational, but the runway had been built. So the American guys went in there, smashed with a sledgehammer a piece of the runway off, a whole chunk of runway, and brought that back. And then they could analyse that, say, it's made up of this is what its composite makeup is. So they could work out then what type of munition we'd need to bomb that airfield to destroy it. So all that sort of stuff was going on. Yes, it was dangerous because, in fact, I believe there's 2 French mission guys killed, and 1 American was shot. An American, I think he was a major or a captain, he was shot dead by an East German soldier who weren't supposed to open fire on each other. I say, if you got caught in an area, you would be apprehended and you'd be in the poo. But certainly, there was no chance that you should be shot, but the American guy was shot. One of the French guys I know, his vehicle was rammed by East Germans. They sort of rammed his car and he died in that. And there was another French guy killed, I think, but I can't remember to be sure. Now, as soldiers, British soldiers out in the cold, British service personnel, Air Force and NATO, if you stationed out in Germany during the Cold War, you was issued with a socksmith card, a little tiny cardboard card, and it would have the socksmith number, an example of a socksmith number plate on the front, and inside it would have what it was all about, and it would have the do's and don'ts if you came across in your time out there a socksmith car. Do not apprehend them, do not interrogate them. There was a whole list of what you couldn't do. The main thing was they wanted you to report the sighting and who was in the car, the number plate was important, etc., where it was, time, location, all the usual sort of reporting stuff. And in fact, I think on the back of the card was a detailed list of how to report it. And I think you rang a number, Hereford 2222 or something like that, a really easy number to remember. And you could phone up and report the sighting that way. I only ever saw one socksmith car, and it was up in Hona near the ranges up there, or on the outskirts of the ranges somewhere. But we were driving past in a Land Rover, saw it, but we were going so quick we didn't get the number plate down, and when we tried to report it, they ripped us a new one because I didn't know what the number plate was. So that's a little bit about spying back in the Cold War days. The missions went, as I say, from the 4 powers had their missions from 1946, and it all ended in 1990, and that's when it was all dissolved. So just a little bit of potted history, if you like, about spying in the Cold War days. Hope it was of some interest. Okay, troops, that's the end of my little waffle. Tab back now and get a cup of tea. Not a very nice day actually, June. I'm a bit cold. So I'll get tabbing a bit quicker after I do this. I can't tab with you like that, I'm all over the place. I'll get tabbing back and give myself a cup of tea. So troops, until the next time, and it won't be long, remember, let's tab.